I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities, and we do this a number of different ways. Through this show, my book, SOAR, SOAR, which is on Amazon, and we also have a Facebook group of like-minded people committed to spiritual growth and transformation, and you can join us at liveauthentically.today/FB. We have an awesome show planned today. I have with me Betz. Hey, Ann, how are you?
Hey, hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here too. So we have a great show planned today for everyone. But before we launch into that, I'd like to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests to kick off the show. And that question is, how do you live authentically every day?
Oh, gosh, I love that. I mean, it just sort of gets my whole mind spinning. So for me, a big part, I'm a teacher, a trainer, a thinker about consciousness, about neuroscience. And so when I think about authenticity, then the first phrase that comes to mind is a walking the talk. And I'm really don't have much patience for people who have great ideas but don't practice them in their personal life. I I have a hard time, following anybody. Not that we have to be perfect. So for me, what living authentically every day is using things that I teach. And can I give you an example, or do you want me to keep the answer shorter?
Yeah, no, I'd love an example.
Okay, so one of the things that I teach is the importance of integration, of marrying different aspects of ourselves. And so, give one example is the aspect of me that is very focused and looking at the details and can be critical, but that's also not a bad thing. You can be discerning, right? And I have that aspect, and marrying that with the aspect of me that has more interested in communality, that is more interested in collaboration, that has empathy, that can see the big picture. And these happen to map to different sides of the brain. So I was getting ready for a meeting with my beloved business partner. We've been partners for 20 years and we're best friends. And I was feeling a little more in the critical side. Of like the details and like this is and like I want it my way, I want it my way, like I had it all figured out because
I'm
I'm like,
familiar with that. Yeah.
you know that one. Yeah. Hopefully we all have aspects of that, but we don't want to take it too far. So I'm sort of realizing as we go in, like, okay, I've got this thought, like, how do I convince her that my way is right? And, here's all and I went, stop. I need to check in with this other part of me as well, this part of me, and ask myself the question, what's really important here? And what's really important always is doing good work, but my relationship with this really, truly amazing being. And if I'm in too much of the critical detail side, I can lose that because it's not the part that is as concerned with relationship. And so I stopped and said, okay, how do I approach this in that way? Get out of my critical part and just go to curiosity, openness, but not let go of it. And so then I approached the meeting with her with stepping more into the openness side, but also holding on to some of what I had seen in this project that we were working on. And that was so much more effective than just going in from what sort of my initial inclination. And for me, that is using this idea of consciousness and also really using neuroscience to be a better person. So that's how I live authentically. Long answer.
But an amazingly rich answer. Thank you. And it's just such a powerful exemplification of how you've very mindfully and intentionally made a shift to come from the place of the soul, move out of the ego and into the soul. So ego, obviously, as you know about, having a personal agenda, convincing, my way, all of that. And when you shift into the space of the soul, that's when we put ourselves in other people's shoes and have compassion and empathy and really try to see the situation from an expanded point of view.
Yeah, and I think in my work, we could talk more about this depending on where we go, but in my work, I look at what is I don't want to ultimately say that my personal experience and knowledge and wisdom and view and even discernment is bad and wrong. I want to include, maybe a way of thinking about it is if this is the ego, it's just not big enough, but there are some things in there that are useful, right?
Sure.
Like I know some stuff. And sometimes I can see some things personally that others can't see, but I can't do it quite with my fingers, but I want to like include that in the broader circle of the soul. So to me, that's integration. I don't want to give up who I am personally, but I want to ground it in this bigger awareness there. And that feels like really the sweet spot.
Yeah, it really does. For a long time, I'd heard phrases around, just silence the ego or eradicate the ego, do away with the ego, check your ego at the door. And I'm not just convinced that that's the healthiest approach. I think it's more important that we recognize the ego, integrate it, celebrate it, and realize that it's there to serve us. So we kind of keep it at bay, when we have the awareness of when the fear is creeping up or the doubt or the blame, shame, overwhelm, whatever it is, that we can have awareness around that, but then we can make a conscious decision about transmuting that fear, that pain, whatever it is, into fuel for our mission, right? So that's when we can say, all right, how can I consciously shift into the space of the soul?
Oh, I love that, because I think about, I'm sure you're probably very well versed in the chakra system. So
Yeah.
I think,
yeah.
right. So I think about the third chakra, personal power, and the lower chakras, we don't hold in the chakra system that they're bad. We hold that they have an important role and they need to be healed. And a big one, and I've seen this because I am a personal coach. I've seen this with a lot of clients, that what I would say is there's work that needs to be done in the third chakra, finding the voice, being willing to be angry about things that are not okay. All of that is a part of the process. You don't want to live your life from the third chakra because you'll just not be very effective, but you want to be able to do the healing that's needed there and include that. And then for me, whenever I think about the lower chakras, or what we might call the more difficult emotions, my question isn't like, remember I had a boyfriend once who's like, I love you, but I don't love you. I don't love you. He didn't say I don't like you. I don't love you when you're angry. And my response to him is then, well, you don't love me then. Now, I can totally get that you don't like it. I can totally get you might want to design something differently. I can totally get there might be some feedback on behavior, but that is all of who I am. And I don't want to say to myself, and I love you, hard enough for most people to say, but I don't love you when you're sad, and I don't love you when you're depressed, and I don't love you when you're angry. What I want to say is, anger, what are you trying to tell me? What's your bit of truth that's important here? And how do I then move that to the heart, or to the higher wisdom, so that then I'm behaving from there, but I'm honoring that there's a part of me that may be important to listen to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to expand on that a little bit and take a deeper dive.
Sure.
You talked about the third chakra, the throat chakra, and finding our voice and speaking our truth. That's actually just very much in line with my business. And what came to me when the whole idea of my business was coming about was one day this whole phrase. I mean, I was anchoring on the word authentic, but this phrase just popped into my head, and this is my mantra for my business: find your voice, speak your truth, live authentically. And so I think that speaking our truth is such a big piece of living authentically. Obviously, there are many, many dimensions to it. But since you mentioned the third chakra, I'd like to kind of go deeper there and have you talk about the importance of speaking your truth, even if it means taking a risk, which it usually does, even if it means potentially shaking up a situation, et cetera. So I'd like to hear you talk about the importance of that, the importance of being vulnerable and speaking your truth, and trusting and having that will be a step closer to alignment and authenticity.
Wow, and I love your business motto. I think it's just so cool. I mean, like, oh, if we could
Yeah.
just live that way. So when I think about this in terms of the chakra system, and the first, the first chakra being fundamental belonging, and the second chakra being creativity, and working with, in the first chakra, some feelings of disconnection and even hopelessness. In the second chakra, working with fear. In the third chakra, finding our power and working with anger. And then the heart chakra, the courage. And to me, that's crossing over the line into, positive expression. And then the throat chakra. So if I think about expressing, because you can express from all of them, but the job of this throat chakra, number 5, is really, expressing your truth, living your authenticity. That's where it really starts happening. You have to do the work below, which is much more, well, who am I? So before I can say my truth, and I think people express without having done the deeper work of saying, really, really, what is it? What is this that I am? And that is often the deep work of any kind of personal development. And then you can move it here and say, okay, now that I know I am a person who, let's see, for example, like, I have a lot of boundaries about when I get in a business relationship. And it's very clear to me that I want to work with people who can work from the heart and above. And it took me a while. I had to heal some fear because, in a practical example, and I always think it's important to be practical as the theoretical. Earlier in my career, I would say yes to opportunities out of the second chakra, fear of thinking, if I don't say yes to this and turn myself into a pretzel to do this work, I won't have any other work and I won't have enough money, and et cetera, right? Like, we do that.
Right.
Especially, us in the entrepreneurial world, that can be part of it. Well, I had to heal that to a place of knowing I could care for myself and knowing I was enough. And I had to do this work here so that then when an opportunity came along, I could say, bless you, thank you, this isn't the right opportunity for me.
And that takes a lot of courage.
And then you go into you have to cross through the courage and let your heart beat. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't do that without knowing doing the work of, I have value. I don't have to have external things give me safety. I can give me safety. I can love myself. I can I think of it as kind of close those wounds, not close those energy centers, but close the wounds, so that then when I'm up here expressing, what I'm expressing is really clean. Does this make sense? It's all kind of how I think about it.
Yes, absolutely. I experienced that. And I even feel the energetic shift when I kind of do that deeper work and express myself, really encourage myself to live, to operate from that throat chakra. And it's very freeing. It's very freeing because you realize when you embody the belief that, and it really does go to the deeper, kind of the core values, right? And what are your beliefs? Right. Like, I believe that, oh no, we have a little visitor. Oh, cute. We have a little visitor. Who is this? Let's see.
He likes this conversation.
Oh,
so
gosh. Hi. What's his name?
His name is Captain Hastings, and he's the captain of our hearts in my family.
Love it. So cute. Well, he is welcome to hang out here the rest of the show. I love
the
more the merrier. So where was I going with it? What was I saying?
Oh, you were talking about speaking from the throat chakra with the healing of the fear and the discomfort.
Right. Yeah. And it really is, it does have very deep belief-based underpinnings. And I think that when you finally get to that expressing, it's easy. And like you said, it flows and it's very freeing. But it does require a lot of deep work. It requires work around standards, around boundaries, like you mentioned, around, what do I believe? Like, one of my core beliefs is that life is rigged in my favor. I believe that regardless of the outcome, I will be okay. So when you really believe that, when you weave that into every fiber of your being, that's what allows you to be able to take risks and to be bold, because you'll be fine either way, right? Even if it means what feels like a temporary disappointment, even if it means an unexpected outcome, whatever, then that's when you really open yourself up to surprises, right? That's when we hand
Yeah,
it
I
over to
love
the
that.
universe.
I
And
love that. It's really, it's like saying until we can honor, include, have compassion for our fear and not push it away, not suppress it, but really that's the only way I know to heal. It's the only way I know to heal anything. I can't go, I can't go fear, go away. I'm not listening because that's just being afraid of fear. To be
right,
really meta, right?
right,
But
right.
for me at least, and I had a lot of fear about money. I was a single mom. I had an okay coaching business about 10 years ago, but I wasn't, I was going into my retirement. I had just gotten divorced. And I really said to myself, and my business partner, who's a coach as well, really helped me, look at okay, I cannot operate from this fear because every time I get a bill, my heart would leap, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so deep work, and I really worked on it, I want to say very intentionally for about 3 years. And every time I was, had an opportunity for coaching, I worked on money fear. And I practiced saying to myself, when a bill came in, I practiced saying to myself, no matter what, I'll be okay. I practiced saying to myself, it's an honor to pay my bills. It's an honor to be responsible. I started paying off all my credit cards, on time. I just did this, even though I was often very nervous, until at some point, and I want to say it took about 3 years where that was my main personal growth issue.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I just went I remember I got I think I got a bill for a car, I had to do a car repair. It was something where it was not in my budget. And I noticed whatever the bill was that was really unexpected. I want to say it was about $1,000. And it was really unexpected. And previously that would have meant, my heart leaping out of my chest, my brain getting really foggy. I know now from my neuroscience work, that's all just, the impact of stress. And I would have been needed counseling for, I would have needed to talk it through with someone, oh my God, I would have been really thrown off. And instead, what I remember was going, oh, okay, well, let me just move some stuff around. And I went, holy shit, who are you? Who are you? That's not the Anne I know.
Yeah.
That's 3 years of deep, persistent work on a deep, persistent fear. And of course, this, Pamela, what ended up happening was the more that I empowered that and just empowered those messages, like the messages you send yourself, it was like this prosperity, but it was like the faucet was open.
Right. Right.
And all of a sudden, and I started having things this just happened to me. I had to get a bunch of trees cut down on my property, $3,000. And I just said, okay, send me $3,000. And I got this unexpected refund from my mortgage refinance.
Oh my gosh.
So it wasn't even like I got it, I went looking for new business. It was just out of nowhere. And I'm like, thank you very much. I like things in balance. And
Yeah, it's amazing how that works when we open up those, open up the energy flow around money. We do that energy work and do that deep work, and we have to do it from the inside out, though, as you know. I mean, and it really does take work. It takes persistence, like you said, over 3 years. Not something you can kind of pick up and put down. It takes persistence. It takes patience, and you just have to keep chipping away at it.
Yeah. And it's, and knowing from a brain neuroplasticity perspective, a word many people are aware of, the brain making changes depending on thought and action, we empower certain, we use the word wiring. It's not literally wiring, but wiring. And so saying, the fear about money had been wired in for, we'll say, 45 years. When I changed it, I'm older now, but it had been wired in for a big chunk of time, probably from about the time I was, 10 on, because I got it from my family, et cetera. And so then to undo that wiring is not going to happen because you say to yourself one time, I'm prosperous, right?
Right.
Money is flowing to me. You could say money is flowing to me, and every part of your brain is going, no, it's not. You're going to die. So you have to find other ways. That's fine. You can keep saying that. At some point, you may feel the truth. But other ways of unpeeling and unpacking and really just pulling that wiring apart and pulling it apart. And I think sometimes in the prosperity world, people get discouraged because they start trying to say this mantra, I'm good enough and I have, and it doesn't feel true. And they don't recognize it's because their wiring, they need additional ways of unwiring what is a very old belief, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm. And so what are some of those additional ways?
Such a good question. You're great. You're great. You're so blow my nose so I don't sneeze again. What are some of those additional ways? I think I like things. One of the most powerful ways I have found is to look at things from different perspectives, including, but as an observer. So this is, I know many people in our world, in this personal development world, are very much love mindfulness and meditation and yoga and things like that, breathing work. And I looked at the deep research on this a couple of years ago. There's a lot of very positive things you get from that. But one of the main things that it does that makes higher states of consciousness possible, it doesn't create the higher states in and of itself necessarily. This is a longer conversation, but one of the things it really does is it strengthens our ability to be an observer. And so in terms of unwiring, one of the things that will really help is how much you can be an observer. And being an observer is saying, wow, I'm really noticing that my heart is pounding, rather than just being in the heart pounding and, brain fog and can't think. And I think that was one of the shifts that happened for me along the way in resolving this fear, was going, and now that I'm thinking about it, there was a point at which I was just lost because I was so stressed out about, $1,000 bill. Mm-hmm. And then there was a point where I'd go, wow, this is distressing. How do I know? My heart is pounding, my face is flushing, my brain feels a little foggy. I had developed a stronger ability. Here's my brain, not just my brain, but my whole system, but to kind of like watch it, go, oh, that's interesting that that's happening. And that is, I think, a critical part of unwiring. You can't unwire when you're lost in it. Right. But as you start watching it, you can have more compassion for it. And one process that I really like that helps people become more of an observer and also requires an observer is to look at something from different perspectives. What would it be like if really I was going to die because I got $1,000 bill? Very helpful to look at the worst case, and stand there and observe and allow that. So you're not suppressing. What would it look like if I could trust that money flowed? You do it as more of a thought experiment. And often this is really helpful if you're doing it in a class or with a coach or somebody who can kind of help hold you there. Mm-hmm. That can give your brain optional wiring. And then, generally what I do if I'm doing this as a coach is I'll have someone look at something from a lot of different perspectives and then say, now, what would you choose? Mm-hmm. And how can we continue to send energy down those neural pathways? Yeah. What are some of the structures? And to me, that's a probably even more effective way than just having like a little, I'm not against little mantras, but that's probably more of a powerful way of rewiring something.
Yeah, it's super powerful. And yeah, that's a lot of the work that I've done too. I mean, I've really just done a lot of mindset work over the years, and it's a moment to moment practice. And I even find that, that now, even when I experience, stress or fear or whatever it is, just, I have to break it down and just stop and just kind of coach myself through. But as anything, that you do over a period of time, with practice, it just gets a lot easier. So after that observer stage though, after you bring awareness to that and you're in that stage of the observer, though, what's next? I know you mentioned like compassion, looking at it from different perspectives, but is there anything else in order to really solidify kind of this new wiring?
Yeah, you want to, when I think about it, I mean, because there are many different ways of sort of doing something that can be somewhat sort of fundamentally basic. So when
Mhm.
I think about this process of neuroplasticity, and it isn't just, for me, I'm a neuroscience expert. I've spent a lot of 10 years really studying this as it relates to human development. But I don't think of it. I learned very early on that if all I thought about was this brain, that was limiting what was really going on in a very significant way. And most of the neuroscientists that I believe in and follow and find myself aligned with, they really are talking about the whole system, that your whole body and even the emotional field between us is part of how we think. It's part of our mind. So where was what your question was? Okay, but in terms of this, so when I think about this process of what we call in neuroscience neuroplasticity, it
Mhm.
is not just how the neurons are connecting within the brain. It's also how are my neurons connecting with signals from the body,
Okay.
or a sense of things externally to me. There's a lot of what is happening here that is a filtering process and is a uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a filtering and interpreting process that's going on in brain central, but the participating team is all over the place, including in what we would call energy fields, right? Not
Mhm.
limited here.
Yep.
But all of that can be, um, so all of that and this will be super obvious to you, but I'll do my sort of riff on it, which is that early in life we develop um, adaptive strategies, and some of them are really positive adaptive strategies. One of my adaptive strategies that was rewarded a lot in my family was to be charming and friendly. So there's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with it. It's like I'm I kind of like that, and it works for me, except if it over calibrates to the point where I've shut down my voice because I have to be charming and friendly. And I
Mhm.
have to not need anything, because that was another one of my adaptive strategies that got wired in, is I'm the one in the family that doesn't need anything. Everybody else's needs more pressing than mine. Okay, not a good adult strategy for health and for self-empowerment and for self-awareness, right?
Mhm. Right.
Right. So in terms of, awareness, lesson number one, and this is true in any decent personal growth leadership program or anything, the first is to start being aware, bring into awareness. And that, what do they say? The truth will set you free, and first it will piss you off. Damn, I have an
True.
adaptive strategy. Shit, sorry for my language, but like I just have this like adaptive strategy, and it's not serving me. And I think that's the way a lot of us enter into personal growth or coaching or anything, is to go, okay, something's not working. This is not working for me. This is not getting me the life that I actually want. And so the first step is to really like be able to look at it, shine some light on it. Like, oh, that's what that is. And here's maybe where it came from. Then what we need to, so what we've got, and the way that I look at it from a neuroplasticity standpoint, my metaphor is, and I come from Minnesota where we have a lot of snow, don't live there anymore, but originally. And so I think about our adaptive strategies are like when you get a big snowfall and you need to get to your mailbox. And that's what we're doing as little kids. There's a reward in that mailbox. There's love, there's acceptance, there's people smiling at you. So you start walking that, you start walking toward that mailbox, and like for me, you're charming and you're smiley and you don't demand too much. And so you walk that, and there's a reward in the mailbox. There's a paycheck. It's a smile. It's a hug. We all love you because you're so understanding, right? And so I've got this path in the snow that's very easy to walk on because I've tramped it down, right?
Yep.
Get to be an adult, and at some point realize there's a cost to that. There's a health cost. There's an
Mhm.
effectiveness cost. Maybe I'm getting feedback about it. Maybe some of my natural needs and desires are leaking out in anger instead of productive, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, the reward seems to be in there's another mailbox, but there's no path to it. That's where the reward now is.
Mhm.
Oh, And so what we have to do is start walking to that mailbox. And because there's no path and it's really deep snow, the other mailbox keeps pulling us back. There's no check there. There's no paycheck there, really, not the paycheck we really want. And so we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And for me, this is a long way of saying, because you asked what else works. It's like anything that puts you going toward the new mailbox, any practice, anything, from, finding a different. And so when I take a different perspective, what I think of it is like tiny little patterns in the snow that are going all over the place. And then you ask yourself, or the coach asks you, what's the one you want to choose? And you choose the one you want to start walking that's most likely, that feels like you can do it, and that'll take you to the mailbox. But then you have to do it. Right? You have to do it again and again. And, for me, there's the thing about, you surround yourself with people who are like, yes, you're going to the new mailbox. Good for you. And you don't surround yourself with the people who are like, wait, come back to this mailbox. We like that version of you. But so many things I think can help us practice that new neural pathway.
Yeah, so powerful. And it really is the space of expansion. As I'm listening to you talk, it's all about the energy of creation. It's about creating possibilities. It's about departing from the antiquated, models that keep us rooted in, in just lack and limitation, and really open up our minds to create possibilities.
There's a really sweet quote from a healer. I'm sure you're familiar with her, named Carolyn Myss, MYSS. And she said, I love this: we evolve at the rate of the tribe we're plugged into. And I think finding a tribe that does not want you to go to the old mailbox. And I did that. I think part of what was really important for me in my healing is I've been involved in the coaching world for 20 years. And not that all coaches are, self-aware, but the ones that I hang out are, and they want me at the new mailbox. They don't want to pull me back to toxic adaptive strategies because it fits their, makes them more comfortable. Whereas to some degree, my family would prefer that. So I had to put myself with people who are like, I'm going to a new mailbox too. Let's walk through this difficult snow together, because this is hard, and I'm with you, and I see this and I see you. And, for me, we don't do this work alone. We're not designed to do this work alone. We are consistent in an energy field that sees us in a particular way. And you can break out of that. But one of the best strategies is we evolve at the rate of the tribe we're plugged into. You find a tribe that wants the best of who you are. And it is hard not to live up to that.
Yeah, that's so important. It really is important to obviously it's one facet of designing our world, our whole life. Totally. People included, our tribe, but a lot of other aspects of it too. And I think we can extend that to what are our home surroundings like? What are the colors like? How organized is it? Just to bring us to a more peaceful, expansive space. And like you were saying, with some people would want us to go to the new mailbox, and some people want to pull us back to the old mailbox. I think sometimes, it can be hard because, we feel like we're being pulled in two different directions, right? We don't want to lose touch with people who have been in our lives for so long, but yet we know we're being pulled in a new direction. But I think that's a really important part of growth, to really understand and actually embrace that, as we move up through the levels of consciousness, not everyone and everything in our lives can come with us. Not everyone is ready to, wants to, is meant to graduate with us. And that can be challenging, but growth is then that's again what calls us to anchor deeper, right? On why are we here? We're here to grow, we're here to love, we're here to learn, we're here to have fun along the way, right? So it really does involve a lot of deep work, but I think a lot of times we get pulled into just comfort, what's comfortable and what's familiar.
And I do think one of the aspects of sort of if we, use the idea of like sort of the hero's journey or the journey of transformation, that many of us, not all of us, but many of us will come across as a point where we say, am I being pulled back to a way of being that is no longer resonant for me, but it is the way that I stay connected. And how do I navigate this place of saying, of what is it I want here? And for me, there's a couple of layers of that. I mean, some of us come from really toxic families. You may have been, raised by someone who's really seriously on the narcissism spectrum or something like that. And sometimes, and I say this with all of my heart, sometimes the answer is you have to move beyond, because the toxicity is so strong that you cannot thrive there. This can be true in the workplace. It can be true even in some friendships. It can be absolutely true in intimate partnerships. That's one end of the spectrum where it's really like, I'm swimming in a toxic lake, and unless I get out of this lake, I can never fully heal because the energy is so strong of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's this middle ground where I sort of think it's like, it might not be a totally poisonous lake, but it's, it's like maybe there's a little more algae than you'd want. And then you have to decide how you want to participate with that system, and I think about, you might not want to swim in it the same way, but there might be some ways of wading into it. And there's a degree to which that I'm at this with my family. They're not poisonous, but there is some things that pull me back to the old mailbox in their patterning. And so I'm a little more distant than I have been. And I'm still trying to figure out what's the right relationship to have with a system that is maybe not as fully healthy for me as I would like it to be. And that's my work, to say, and I'm in the middle of that. How do I participate here that honors every part of who I am? Because we're not looking at malignant, destructive people, but we're looking at an old, a way of being that is not the mailbox I want to go to. And then there's the other end of things where, I have like my business partner and all my friends who only ever want for me what I want and what is healthiest and best and most shining of my light. And that's where I prefer to spend most of my time, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can definitely understand why, because when you're in that space of growth, expansion, surrounding yourself with growth-minded people, when we really check in with ourselves and we're acutely aware of our feelings, it's natural to want to gravitate towards the places that feel good, right? Like we naturally want to feel amazing. That's kind of our natural state of being, is to feel amazing. I think sometimes we don't realize that we get pulled into other spaces, and then it isn't until that weight is lifted that we realize how much we've been bogged down with, right? How much we've been carrying.
Right. And I think there's something I want to say, like in Oprah Winfrey's dressing room, and maybe the exact quote, but she has like some sign in her dressing room, which is basically along the lines of, don't bring your negative energy in here.
Oh, I love it. Very direct.
Something like that. We should find out. Maybe somebody knows what the exact quote is, but it's something like that. And I really think about, for me, I met a man once who had this beautiful tattoo, and it was a Tibetan symbol, and the symbol was for joy. And his tattoo was outlined in black. And I said, so what is that about? And he said, well, when you outline something in black in Tibetan tradition, you're protecting it. And my view of life is protect your joy.
I love that.
And I believe that is one thing. That's what Oprah's trying to do. I think that for me, that's how I'm assessing friendships, relationships, business partners. Is this a person who will help me protect my joy, or is this a person who will undermine my joy? And there is no amount of money in the world that is worth it to me to undermine my joy.
Yeah, agreed.
Not anymore. When I was in fear, oh yes, you could buy my joy. Now it's not for sale.
Yeah, I love that. That's something that I do even, in my home, just with my kids, like you said, the phrase, what was it exactly? Like no negative energy or something like that.
I don't think that's the exact phrase, but it's like, don't bring your negative energy in here is the essence. Yeah.
I love that. And that's kind of, I don't have a sign in my house, but maybe I will soon, but I maintain that vibe in my house too. Like I tell my kids, like, don't, if you're having a bad day or whatever, like, don't stomp in the kitchen and start throwing your stuff around. Like we want to maintain this environment to be a peaceful space, right? It's, that's something that we're all entitled to. And so if you're having a bad day, like, let's talk about it. Let's go in a different room and talk about it. And just so we can all maintain this peaceful atmosphere. And I think it's important to do that intentionally and mindfully.
Absolutely. And what an amazing thing for your kids that they're learning two things. One is we have a right to a peaceful environment, and you have a right to how you feel. You don't have a right to act in any certain way. You don't have a right to hit your brother or to, throw things around. That is not a God-given right or a universe-given right. But the feeling of anger or frustration or sadness, even if it's at me as a mom or a friend or a partner, you have a right to that, and I will listen. But I'm not going to listen to, the behavior is not necessary, and it is disruptive to everyone else. So let's talk about it. Let's find out what's really going on. And, to do that at a young age, because just a really quick story, because I think this is interesting in terms of development. When I was about 17 or 18, I did my first personal growth work. And the group that I was with had really a lot of emphasis on integrity. And I was about 18, my brain was still developing. And I had this realization a while ago where I thought, because integrity for me is an absolute, and I thought, well, I think that's because I was around so many people where it was an absolute at age 18 that it got hardwired in. Like, no question, like the way, in a good way, like the way some of our less good things get wired in families. So with your children and others who are doing this kind of thing, what will be wired in for them is it is okay to talk about feelings. And it's not okay to hit your brother or, stomp around. And that's not what we do. And what a gift.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And since we've kind of gone this direction and started to talk about this and, with regard to kids and, at younger ages, I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper there because, this is an area that I've wondered about. I happen to stumble upon all of this mindset work, neuroscience, I classify myself, I guess it's never too late to learn, obviously, but I kind of I joke sometimes saying, I was like late to the party on all this stuff. And what if I had known what I know, what I learned starting in my 30s when I was 10, when I was 5, right? Like, what if I grew up in this environment, which I didn't, no judgment. My parents didn't have the knowledge, the wisdom. There wasn't all this focus on personal growth and everything. So I guess to cut to the chase, my question is, why is Mindset 101 not a class on the curriculum in school? That's my question, because we're learning about like all this, like it's great to know about math and science, but like if we don't have the mindset to say like I could be the most amazing mathematician in the world, like what good is all of the the number skills, right? So this is like the most important, in my opinion, this is like one of the most important topics that we could teach our kids is how to create their reality through their thoughts. So why do you think that isn't a top priority?
Because the education system is broken. I mean, really, like there's so many other things that I think are just so wrong. And yes, and the education system, I believe, just for a moment to go a little cynical, and then I'll talk about what the hope and the possibility is. But I'm going to go cynical for a minute, which is that, and this is not new news, lots of people know this, but the education system is designed for the capitalist machine. Sit down, shut up, do your work this way, because then you will be good cogs in the capitalist machine to make people money. So it's not designed to create entrepreneurs for the most part. And I think there's exceptions. That's when we get to the hope. But I think for the most part, because why isn't this taught? Because it would ruin capitalism.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, really, you socialist. You don't want people thinking for themselves, for God's sake, or only in limited ways, right?
Yeah.
Ooh,
right. Yeah. But it's just so powerful that, I think that there's so many opportunities to introduce, young children, people at a young age to this whole, the power of mindset.
Yeah. And so for me, the hope is, I mean, I think, so that's my, that's very cynical, but if I go more toward what I actually really think is happening in education, is that it's a system. It's like a big cruise ship, doesn't turn very quickly as an overall system, but I think it's turning. And because what's happening is more parents are becoming aware. The zeitgeist, you were saying, why wasn't I raised with this? Well, even just little context, neuroscience is a 50-some-year-old field. We've only, and it was started, I always think it's kind of cute because neuroscience was born as a field officially recognized. I mean, there are other things happening, but like, this field. 1964, that's the year I was born. So it's 57 years old. I'll always know how old it is because it's how old I am. And that's when the first department of neuroscience was created. There have, in watching what's happening, it was interesting. I said I did my first personal growth at age 18. So I've watched this personal development field for 40 years almost. Mm-hmm. And I've watched it evolve, and I've watched things that I was learning 40 years ago that people thought were really weird that now are just common knowledge. Like mine, like some of this, that it's not, if I say we have personal responsibility about our life, really 40 years ago, people were like, no, people are victims. And it's, and you're like, now then we know it's a little more layered. Like you can be a survivor of something and there's still a lesson there, and you didn't necessarily create this because you're bad, but there's always something we could learn. Like we're getting even more nuanced with it. Mm-hmm. So we're part, you and I were part of creating this zeitgeist, and it is affecting the educational system. And we see it first with the alternative things like Montessori and Waldorf. We see it in some charter schools, we see more of an effort. There is a really interesting guy at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And his name will come to me in a minute, who's pioneered research on mindfulness and is teaching mindfulness in schools. Oh, so, it's like it's starting to infiltrate. And, if we have this question in 20 years, we may be seeing, our schools are doing more of teaching the right thing. There are many, many pockets of some really cool stuff, but the system itself hasn't made the turn yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, hopefully. And like you said, 20 years, 40 years,
I hope so.
Very different conversation, but it is just so powerful. And I've started to introduce my kids to it, and they just light up. It's it's eye-opening for them to see how their thoughts can shift their reality.
Totally. And then how old are your kids?
17, 15, 13, and 10.
Oh, so in 10 years, I'm not saying they're going to go into teaching, but in, 10 years, these could be the teachers who were raised with this, who are going to be like, we have to teach this. Mm-hmm. The administrators. We're raising a different generation of kids because the energy field of particularly the Western world is starting to change more, but it's a long change.
Right. Right.
But some of these kids who had their emotions listened to and understand emotions are part of life. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go into the workplace and feel like they have to shut their emotions down. They're going to demand workplaces that honor that. And this is actually some of the big criticism of the Gen Z, Gen Y, millennial generation is they are making different demands they're demanding to be treated with respect. And the boomers are like, why do you get treated with like, why should we do that? Well, pretty soon the boomers are all going to be retired. We're going to have different generations that have different expectations for human interaction.
Yeah. And it really
hopefully,
yeah.
Like you, because of parents like you.
Oh, you're so sweet. It's every day. It's a learning experience, but trying to help them understand that thoughts can create their reality, work in emotions. Yesterday, we were just standing around the island at dinner time, and my oldest, who's getting ready to go away to college, in fact, we're doing a college visit this coming weekend, she started to say something, and she's like, wait, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to cry. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, you can cry, just say it. And she's like, you know what, I'm just next year at this time, I'm not going to be here. I'm going away to college. And then what if I don't move back? And she starts like catastrophizing. And then,
Yeah.
and I said, like, it's okay if you cry. So she starts crying. I tear up. Her friend
Yeah.
is looking at us like, but,
Mhm.
and then we just had the conversation. I'm like, it's okay. Emotions are all part of this. There's
Yeah.
going to be a sadness element to this, but then there's also an opportunity. Like you, I love how you shifted and pivoted and focused on, like mentioned, hope and possibilities. We can always do that, right? We can do that in any situation, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
So we can either stay stuck in the sadness and look at what we're stepping out of and stay focused on that, or we can shift into what we're moving into. So, we all shared some tears yesterday and then started talking about all the fun parties she's going to get to go to. So,
Right. And what I love about that, and I think this is really, I'm just learning this more and more, is that expressed tear, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but unexpressed tears will live in our body and will may at some point turn into disease. And we are also living in this time where there's more and more research on how suppressed emotions, unexpressed emotions, things like that, are biochemically, scientifically linked to disease. What happens with various emotional states, what kind of hormones, neurotransmitters they connect, and why that then the logical outcome is certain types of disease. And this, I got to tell you, 40 years ago, this was witchcraft. Louise Hay, I can't remember the name of her little book, but Louise Hay was one of the pioneers. She did it all intuitively. And now you can map it more scientifically. But many interesting researches in the field, and a lot of it, normal doctors will now start talking about, like the idea that stress levels can have an impact on your heart and other parts of your body. 40 years ago, that was just weird. It's all just mechanical. Now we know it isn't. And a doctor, any decent doctor, if you go in with, heart issues, will ask about your stress.
Yeah.
And we'll
Yeah.
know there's an emotional, relational component to your illness. That has changed in 40 years powerfully. So I'm hopeful. It's a slow change, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I wanted to say that I'm really loving you did with your daughter, because I do see this sometimes in the spiritual world, and I'm really, I'm disturbed by it because of what I know from how the system operates. Is I don't like the spiritual bypass. And my business partner and I are catching each other on this phrase, but it's all good. Because we're noticing oh, no, but it's all good. Because often, no, let's stop saying that. Let's stop saying, but it's all good. And let's find a different way to express, I'm sad. And I'm going to be sad and honor the sadness and sit with the sadness and be present to the sadness until it shifts to something else. Rather than saying, it's like, it's not okay. It's not okay to have a bad day. It's not okay to be angry or sad. Rather than just saying, I'm sad. So that's I've got a new mission. Can we just please stop saying it's all good? I understand the sentiment, but I think it shuts something down in our being when we kind of just try to go to the positive too soon. There's time.
I agree. Yeah, it's not. And again, I say this with no judgment because it is well-intentioned. It is in the spirit of positivity, but it's not truly authentic, right? Because we're turning a blind eye to some of the more raw and real emotions.
Yeah. And what ends up happening, I think, and unfortunately, I think we've seen this with people that have felt like they needed to be. I had a dear friend who was very much this kind of person who was, everything was positive. She was a huge giver. She was a massage therapist, huge. She just gave to everyone. And if you asked her, tried to have her, tell you how she was really feeling, it was like, no, it's all good. What about you? Right. And it wasn't all good. And she ended up taking her own life.
Oh,
and I don't mean to get super, I'm sorry if that's too much, but what I learned from that is that's the cost. That's the ultimate cost And I talked with her husband after it happened. Um, and he really said, she just never let herself feel. And
Mhm.
so she, it gets so shut down. And because she can't express the sadness like your daughter did, there's no room for it. And it just festered in her. And this incredible, beautiful being of light who never let herself feel her own darkness, couldn't deal with the darkness anymore. And I think we've seen that with people like Anthony Bourdain. And I
Mhm.
think there's been some others where we got to let it find a way for it to come out that is okay and where it can be honored, because that's the road to healing, not the shutting it down.
Yeah, yeah, so true.
Yeah.
For sharing that. I just realized our time. We went way over what I
Did
thought
we
we would.
really? I mean,
We didn't even get, I had a little mini agenda here on the side and I didn't even have an opportunity to look at that. I was just so immersed in our super rich, expansive discussion. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up for now.
Sure.
But I wanted to just give you a minute or two here to talk about, I'm going to give you carte blanche to talk about whatever you would like to. I know you've got an amazing business program, your whole 7 levels of effectiveness. So whatever you'd like to talk about, and including your contact information as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Pamela. I mean, not a lot. I'm not a big pitcher, but what I will say is that if you are a coach, we have a couple of programs. We do a wonderful neuroscience program where we really look at how neuroscience relates to different levels of consciousness. We use our model of the 7 levels of effectiveness, and you can find that, I think, in about 10 different languages on our website, which is beaboveleadership.com. And I am Anne at beaboveleadership.com. You can reach me there. Also through Ann Betz at LinkedIn or Facebook. Just reach out to me. We also have a series that we do, again, for professional coaches. You need to have coach training because we don't do the basics, but we do a series on trauma. And we really look at how coaching can help certain clients, is appropriate for certain clients, and can help them work with trauma. And we actually work very intentionally with the chakra system in that program. And also the 7 levels of effectiveness, we marry those together. So those are our main programs. There are some recorded programs on our website that are also just available for purchase, that if you're not a coach but want to see more. And we have a YouTube channel, which is, again, Be Above, BE, the word above, leadership. And we're on YouTube, and there's some interesting resources there. So if you're not a coach, just check us out there. And it may be in the future, you might want to sign up for our website. We may be expanding into things that are just more available for general personal development. Right now, our main focus is helping coaches be more effective in working with their clients in a more expanded way. So yeah, thank you for asking.
I love it. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Lovely.
I love it. I love everything you're about. I love the work that you're putting out in the world. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. And you're just a wonderful interviewer and just so curious. And I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I do as well. So I really appreciate you being here. And to our audience, our viewers and listeners, I appreciate you. As you know by now, time is a choice. I say that all the time. And I'm grateful that you've carved time out of your day to be here and listen to everything that Anne has had to share. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.